Chapter 2 of A Tale of Three Lions by H. Rider Haggard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christine. A Tale of Three Lions by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 2 What Was Found in the Pool. Something over a fortnight had passed since the night when I lost half a sovereign, and found £1250 in looking for it, and instead of that horrid hole, for which, after all, El Dorado was hardly a misnomer, a very different scene stretched away before us, clad in the silver robe of the moonlight. We were camped, Harry and I, two Kaffirs, a Scotch cart, and 6 oxen, on the swelling side of a great wave of bush-clad land. Just where we had made our camp, however, the bush was very sparse, and only grew about in clumps, while here and there were single flat-topped mimosa trees. To our right, a little stream, which had cut a deep channel for itself in the bosom of the slope, flowed musically on between banks green with maidenhair, wild asparagus, and many beautiful grasses. The bedrock here was red granite, and in the course of centuries of patient washing the water had hollowed out some of the huge slabs in its path into great troughs and cups, and these we used for bathing places. No Roman lady, with her baths of porphyry and alabaster, could have had a more delicious spot to bathe herself than we found within 50 yards of our skerm, or rough enclosure of mimosa thorn, that we had dragged together round the cart to protect us from the attacks of lions. That there were several of these brutes about I knew from their spoor, though we had neither heard nor seen them. Our bath was a little nook, where the eddy of the stream had washed away a mass of soil, and on the edge of it there grew a most beautiful old mimosa thorn. Beneath the thorn was a large smooth slab of granite, fringed all round with maidenhair and other ferns, that sloped gently down to a pool of the clearest sparkling water, which lay in a bowl of granite about 10 feet wide by 5 feet deep in the centre. Here to this slab we went every morning to bathe, and that delightful bath is among the most pleasant of my hunting reminiscences, and it is also, for reasons which will presently appear, among the most painful. It was a lovely night. Harry and I sat to the windward of that fire, where the two Kaffirs were busily employed in cooking some impala steaks off a buck which Harry, to his great joy, had shot that morning, and were as perfectly contented with ourselves and the world at large as two people could possibly be. The night was beautiful, and it would require somebody with more words on the tip of his tongue than I have to describe properly the chastened majesty of those moonlit wilds. Away for ever and for ever, away to the mysterious north, rolled the great bush ocean, over which the silence brooded. There beneath us a mile or more to the right ran the white Oliphant, and mirror-like flashed back the moon, whose silver spears were shivered on its breast, and then tossed in twisted lines of light far and wide about the mountains and the plain. Down upon the river banks grew great timber trees, that through the stillness pointed solemnly to heaven, and the beauty of the night lay upon them like a cloud. Everywhere was silence, silence in the starred depths, silence on the bosom of the sleeping earth. Now, if ever, great thoughts might rise in a man's mind, and for a space he might forget his littleness in the sense that he partook of the pure immensity about him. Hark! What was that? From far away down by the river there comes a mighty rolling sound, then another and another. It is the lion seeking his meat. I saw Harry shiver and turn a little pale. He was a plucky boy enough, but the roar of a lion heard for the first time in this solemn bush veldt at night is apt to shake the nerves of any lad. "Lions, my boy," I said. "They are hunting down by the river there. But I don't think that you need make yourself uneasy. We have been here 3 nights now, and if they were going to pay us a visit I think that they would have done so before this. However, we will make up the fire. Here, Pharaoh, do you and Jim Jim get some more wood before we go to sleep, else the cats will be pouring round you before morning." Pharaoh, a great brawny Swazi, who had been working for me at Pilgrim's Rest, laughed, rose, and stretched himself, then calling to Jim Jim to bring the axe and the rame, started off in the moonlight towards a clump of sugar bush, where we cut our fuel from some dead trees. He was a fine fellow in his way, was Pharaoh, and I think that he had been named Pharaoh because he had an Egyptian cast of countenance and a royal sort of swagger about him. But his way was a somewhat peculiar way, on account of the uncertainty of his temper, and very few people could get on with him. Also, if he could find liquor he would drink like a fish, and when he drank he became shockingly bloodthirsty. There were his bad points; his good ones were that, like most people of the Zulu blood, he became exceedingly attached if he took to you at all. He was a hard working and intelligent man, and about as daredevil and plucky a fellow at a pinch as I have ever had to do with. He was about 35 years of age or so, but not a keshla or ring man. I believe that he had got into trouble in some way in Swaziland, and the authorities of his tribe would not allow him to assume the ring, and that is why he came to work at the goldfields. The other man, or rather lad, Jim Jim, was a Mapoch Kaffir, or Knobnose, and even in the light of subsequent events I fear I cannot speak very well of him. He was an idle and careless young rascal, and only that very morning I had to tell Pharaoh to give him a beating for letting the oxen stray, which Pharaoh did with the greatest gusto, although he was by way of being very fond of Jim Jim. Indeed, I saw him consoling Jim Jim afterwards with a pinch of snuff from his own ear box, whilst he explained to him that the next time it came in the way of duty to flog him, he meant to thrash him with the other hand, so as to cross the old cuts and make a pretty pattern on his back. Well, off they went, though Jim Jim did not at all like leaving the camp at that hour, even when the moonlight was so bright, and in due course returned safely enough with a great bundle of wood. I laughed at Jim Jim and asked him if he had seen anything, and he said yes, he had. He had seen two large yellow eyes staring at him from behind a bush, and heard something snore. As, however, on further investigation the yellow eyes and the snore appeared to have existed only in Jim Jim's lively imagination, I was not greatly disturbed by this alarming report, but having seen to the making up of the fire, got into the skerm and went quietly to sleep with Harry by my side. Some hours afterwards I woke up with a start. I don't know what woke me. The moon had gone down, or at least was almost hidden behind the soft horizon of bush, only her red rim being visible. Also a wind had sprung up and was driving long hurrying lines of cloud across the starry sky, and altogether a great change had come over the mood of the night. By the look of the sky I judged that we must be about 2 hours from daybreak. The oxen, which were as usual tied to the disselboom of the Scotch cart, were very restless. They kept snuffling and blowing and rising up and lying down again, so I at once suspected that they must win something. Presently I knew what it was that they winded, for within 50 yards of us a lion roared, not very loud but quite loud enough to make my heart come into my mouth. Pharaoh was sleeping on the other side of the cart, and looking beneath it I saw him raise his head and listen. "Lion, Inkoos," he whispered, "lion." Jim Jim also jumped up, and by the faint light I could see that he was in a very great fright indeed. Thinking that it was as well to be prepared for emergencies, I told Pharaoh to throw food upon the fire, and woke up Harry, who I verily believe was capable of sleeping happily through the crack of doom. He was a little scared at first, but presently the excitement of the position came home to him, and he grew quite anxious to see His Majesty face to face. I got my rifle handy and gave Harry his, a Wesley Richards fowling block, which is a very useful gun for a youth, being light and yet a good killing rifle, and then we waited. For a long time nothing happened, and I began to think that the best thing we could do would be go to sleep again, when suddenly I heard a sound more like a cough than a